Have you tried revision and maybe you have resistance around changing your memories? You're like, no, I just really want to keep those memories the way they are. I don't want to revise anything and, maybe lose the story that happened there. But you do want the healing benefits and the transformational benefits of the revision practice. This is the video for you. I used to have a lot of attachment I still do, to some of my memories. I like to keep them the way they are, but I also have really seen how that attachment can be holding on to negative cycles and perpetuating them in my present moment and my future. So where is this balance of preserving my memories and revising the way things happened? Because if you're not familiar with revision, it is the practice of going back through negative situations, maybe like where people weren't choosing you, people made you feel like you weren't enough, people didn't prioritize you, those sorts of things. You go back through your wounded beliefs and the traumatic moments maybe, or the foundational moments that were really reflecting back those beliefs to you, maybe the foundational moments in your childhood where you learned these beliefs, and you create a new scenario where that belief was not true. So you would take the scenario of, perhaps your mother showing you that you're not a priority, and you would create new memories of her prioritizing you. Now, for some people, there's resistance around this. I'm one of those people. And I'm going to share with you in this video how I worked around that to find a way that balances the healing benefits of revision without truly losing the objective reality of your memories. So thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Alex. I talk about manifestation, soul healing, spiritual healing, your personal healing, and go ahead, like this video, drop a comment, let me know what's up with you, subscribe, ring the bell, blah, blah, blah. Let's get into it. So I'm going to start with what I think is perhaps the simplest version of this mental exercise that I do, because if you're doing revision, like I just described it, it's a mental exercise of you going back to moments in your memory where you felt your wounded beliefs were happening, were present, were being shown to you, and you're going to change the story. And a lot of people change the story through literally changing the story. I need to explain that more. By changing the events of what happened. What I like to do is not change the events of what happened, but rather change the story behind those events. There we go. That made more sense. So I'm going to, of course, give you some examples here. Excuse me, I am still sick, so if it's like a cut of, you notice me pausing and then starting the recording again, it's because I gotta take some time to rehydrate. My voice is still going too, so apologies. So one thing that actually just kind of happened to me recently, which was really cool, I've been working on the healing the wound of not being chosen. So I've been affirming that I am chosen, and I've been doing the inner work around this. And one day I came home from work and I was just really overwhelmed with exhaustion, and I just really felt like I had to close my eyes. I don't like napping. I avoid it at all costs. It just disorients me. I'm not a fan. And it's very rare for me to rest like this, but I felt like I was supposed to close my eyes, and I found myself pulled down into this deep, relaxed, meditative state. And I started seeing events from my past, and I was like, why am I thinking of these, random events or seemingly random events? And what I realized, what was playing out before me, were my memories of times that people did not choose me. And I was like, oh my goodness, okay, this makes so much sense now why these things happened. These were reflections of me not feeling chosen that I had not identified yet. And so I was able to see every single moment how I was not being chosen. And what was really interesting was at the end of things, I had this aha moment of, okay, these people weren't choosing me. So what you could do with revision is change the events and start visualizing them actually showing up for you, choosing you, because it might not being chosen pairs with people not showing up for me. So it was like going hand in hand. And I could redo the events, but for personal reasons, I just don't want to. I want to remember things the way they happened, but with a new story, because then what I started to see was I showed up for myself. I chose myself in every moment that I felt that these other people were not choosing me, not showing up for me, disrespecting me. I chose to respect myself. I chose to take the action in response to stand up for myself, show up for myself. And so I changed the story because, let's go back to Neville Goddard, there is no one to change but self, and these other people, these external people, are just reflecting back my beliefs. So if I don't want to change my memory of the events of their behavior, I can at least change the core belief, which is the important one, of I chose myself. Because me choosing myself is more important, I don't want to say more important, but going to have a more profound effect than me just believing that other people choose me. Because when we're healing wounded beliefs, you need to become the healed version of you. So if I want other people to choose me and show up for me, I must become the version of me that shows up for me and chooses me. As much as I then need to still believe that other people will also do that, it is vital that I become the person that chooses myself and shows up for myself. For me, for myself. Correct my grammar in the comments. And what I found was that I did not need to change mentally the events and actions and behaviors of these people, because the major takeaway from it was, oh my goodness, I've been showing up for myself this whole time. Even when I felt that that wasn't something that was happening for me, I was doing it. And so this is still a massive piece of healing. I don't feel that I need to see that those other people showed up for me when they didn't, because I can now see that I showed up for myself and that I chose myself. And so this is the form of revision that I like, because then I can see that, okay, I chose to do this. I have the power within me, and now I know that all I have to do is shift that thinking about other people, and of course they're going to show up. I hope this is making sense, because I feel like I could be kind of shooting my argument in the foot here. But I hope that my point is coming across. I know these things can get like a little wonky. But in summary, or in conclusion with that example, the point being was that I realized that I was actually, embodying this state, embodying the healed version of the wounded belief I had at the time. And so this was my way of like going back and revising to say, no, I've always been chosen and people show up for me, or I've always been shown up for. Sounds weird when I'm not putting the word people in it. And that the evidence within myself was enough. Does that make sense? That I didn't need to revise that these other people did it, because just realizing that I was the one who did it was evidence enough for me that I felt that it had a profound effect on my belief system and healing my negative beliefs. So that's the simple one that I like to do. Now there is a little bit more complicated one, and I would say it's similar to the exercise. I'll link the video down below. The exercise that I shared about visualizing sitting down with people that you have attachment to, negative attachment to, exes, old relationships that have ended, people that you have had negative cycles with, and being vulnerable, expressing your feelings, and doing the healing there. So if you haven't watched that, I would suggest watching that. I think it would be helpful for what I'm about to explain. So the other one is very similar to what I just described. I've personally found it is most helpful with people I still have a relationship with. The one I just described, the situation I was sharing, was around old coworkers at a place I no longer worked at briefly. So not people I really have attachment to. There's no close relationship with them no communication with them, no desire for any of that. They're just out of my life. But this other thing I'm about to share, I have specifically used when it comes to like my parents, my childhood, people that I've had lifelong connections with, or romantic partners that I have been very close with and had long-term established relationships with. So it's a similar thing where I went back and but this was intentional. This wasn't a random almost nap that took me through this. This was something that I intentionally went back to look at. So I had been working on my wounded beliefs of not choosing myself and not feeling chosen. And I went back and looked at times in my childhood where I felt that the conflicts that happened between me and my parents, or whoever, were stemming from this, or making me feel like I wasn't chosen, because that's a very clear reflection of a wound. So I was going back to times where I was feeling the negative wound a wound is negative, so didn't need to say that, where I was feeling the wound being reflected. I would go back to those memories, and with a sense of objectivity, compassion, understanding that the other person in this scenario, in this memory with me, is only reflecting back my belief. And I have said this in many videos, that I believe when we talk about other people conforming to your beliefs, they are not embodying it. Necessarily they can, but they do not have to embody your beliefs about them and yourself and how people show up for you. They just need to behave in a way that will reflect it back to you. That's why sometimes, if you've ever observed, like maybe you're friends with a couple and all of a sudden they have like a not so great breakup. It's nothing super crazy, but they have a breakup, and maybe both parties, and you hear two very different stories, and probably one party really feels that the other one mistreated them, but you can see from knowing the other person that that was never the intent. You can also understand why that person feels that way, but you can see where there are these two different realities that occur. This is what I'm talking about. The other person only needs to show up in a way that your brain can perceive its truth. The other person doesn't really need to not be choosing you. They don't really need to be some villainous person. They just need to act and say things that you can perceive in the way that matches your belief system. So I don't know if you've ever had someone accuse you of having a tone that you didn't have, and you're like, I didn't say it like that, but you said something that their brain could perceive in a negative tone and give them the validation of their negative beliefs, right? So moving on, now that I've explained that, hopefully. So going back in my memory to these core moments in my childhood, specifically for this example of not feeling chosen, conflicts that I had with my parents, with, a sibling, whatever, and seeing, objectively understanding that this other person had no choice but to reflect back at me my belief, and so freeing them of that role and that narrative, that they weren't really not choosing me, they were just reflecting back at me, and now I can objectively see them for who they were in that moment. And I can see that they, have their own issues, their own limiting beliefs, their own wounding, their own trauma, and this creates their behavior, their, ability to connect emotionally, ability to communicate in a certain way. They're their own person with their own issues and their own struggles, right? And their own limitations. And I'm able to see this objectively now. And I can look through understanding who they are capable of being at that time and see that they did their best to choose me. And in their own way, they were choosing me. And so I don't like to rewrite the events entirely, but this is how I rewrite the story. Abrachi requested to join me for the end of this video. So that is how I rewrite or revise my past without really altering my memories. I will say that there are a few times where I have gone and sort of created new memories or changed a few things. I unfortunately can't give you examples of it because it was nothing I had a strong attachment around. Nothing that felt important for me to remember the events the way they were. I honestly feel that my method may be healthier objectively because it gives you the perspective and understanding to keep in mind that other people are their own people going through their own stuff with their own limitations, their own limiting beliefs. And it also keeps us objective. I think that people are always just going to be able to show up for you the way you're allowing. So I actually like my method more than the revisions I have heard about, because I think it keeps you in your power, even if it's really to say, oh, I really created this negativity and it happened for me this way and made me feel this way. It reminds me that I was in control, and it makes me feel very strong in the fact that I can control and change my future, because I was able to so greatly control and influence my past in a way that, you know, I go back and look at these scenarios, and of course they affected me greatly, some of them. You know, they were highly impactful situations and encounters, but going back and looking at things objectively, I see that it really did not have the weight that I felt and that transpired onto me. And I think that that's really fascinating. It can be really tough because our trauma is just really difficult to work through and come to terms with some of the things that we've experienced. So I know that this is difficult. It's not the easiest. Maybe apply it to gentler situations that you've been through. There can be a lot of resistance around heavier situations, but I personally have found that when I go back to those very heavy situations for me, those very intensely transformative, dramatic moments in my life, and break them down objectively and see that it wasn't really happening the way I felt it was, but at the same time it was because I felt it. Like, I'm not trying to invalidate anyone here. I want to be clear that just being able to see all the different sides of everything, all the different facets of the situation, shows me how powerful my mind is, that I was able to perceive things the way I did. And then I can see what the third truth was, you know, the objective truth. And then I can also see what was happening in the other party too. Very, very interesting. I'm going to wrap it up there. Let me know if there's anything I can explain better in the comments. You know the drill. I love hearing from you guys. What are you working on? If you don't have anything to share with me, just leave some emojis or something to, you know, give me a little bit of engagement and let me know that you're tuning in. I hope this video finds you well, and I will see you in the next one.